What if an angel brought you a cake? Do you like cake?
Oh, yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome to Live It Out Now. We are starting a new series today called Overcome, where we want to look at different topics of different things that kind of drag us down and learn how God helps us get through whatever we're going through in life. And so today we're going to be looking at how we can overcome fear, and we're really glad that you're here with us. I'm going to kick things over to
Hey everybody. Just remember that the first step in DBS is we talk about our lives and check in with everybody. So, Kyle, actually, Nikki, how are things?
Things are okay. I am just really tired. I am taking the summer to work because normally, I'd be doing several youth camps, maybe some ropes course stuff, and all of that's canceled. Thanks COVID-19. So I decided to work instead and pay off some debt and, all that good stuff, which is great, but I'm super tired. My body is tired. Like mentally, emotionally, I'm fine, but like physically, I am exhausted. So that sums up where I'm at. What about you, Kyle?
I'm doing pretty well. I had some caffeine this afternoon, so I'm kind of bouncing back and forth. But yeah, I'd say probably the highs from my week are, let me start with the low. My low was that I had kind of a tough conversation with someone this week, and it was just kind of discouraging because, we left on good terms, but it was just frustrating. I can't really give many details, but those conversations come around every now and then in youth group or youth ministry. But my high is that for whatever reason, and I think this was really, the Lord encouraging me, but I had a bunch of different people reach out from my past and just kind of give me encouragement, like really out of the blue, it seemed like, And so coming off of a bad conversation like that, it was so cool to hear from some people that I hadn't heard from in years. And so that was really great. And I guess I'll share kind of like where I saw God also this past week. And it kind of all fits together, I think. This week I had a lot of different emotions and experiences, but it was really good overall. Like, I was praying one morning, trying to get back into that habit better, and I just really felt convicted about something that I'd been holding on to, and it was just kind of I guess a grudge I was holding against someone, and so I just reached out to them and apologized, and it was so great to hear them say that it's all forgiven and all of that, and it was just something I needed to do because I really felt it weighing on my heart, and so it was overall a really good week for me. What about you, Sam?
Pause. Can you put your mic in front of your face?
Higher.
No. Things for me have been good this week. I'm still crazy busy, but it's been a blessing, and I'll pan some of our auditor or our fellowship hall right now, but we're setting up for a yard sale, and it's been a blessing these past couple of weeks just to see teens, especially this week, to see teens and to see them work together and be together and just really encouraging each other. It's been such a huge blessing for me to see that and spend multiple days. Like today, I spent a little bit of time with some teenagers and just, messing around and working on that, the yard sale stuff, just organizing it. And it's been really cool to see that. Where do I see God at work is through that. It's just really encouraging because a lot of these teens are struggling right now, that their parents aren't letting them go out for good reason. But they can come here and see each other and just have a good time, smile together and encourage each other. That's what a lot of my teens need. That's what I need. And it's just been really good to see that.
Okay, sorry guys. I'm gonna just edit that pause out. Told you I'm tired. Brain's not really rolling. Okay, so today we want to look at a passage from 1 Kings, and it's about a story about Elijah the prophet. So, after a really great victory, Elijah loses faith and fears for his life. So we're going to turn to that. It's 1 Kings 19, 1 through 18. You're welcome to follow along. I pull it back up. And forgive me for surely butchering some of these names. There's a lot of them. It's a good time. Okay. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and including a detailed account of how he killed all the prophets with the sword. Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah with this warning: "May the gods judge me severely if by this time tomorrow I do not take your life as you did theirs." Elijah was terrified, so he got up and fled for his life to Beersheba in Judah. He left his servant there while he went a day's journey into the desert. He went and sat down under a shrub and asked the Lord to take his life. "I've had enough. Now, O Lord, take my life. After all, I'm no better than my ancestors." He stretched out and fell asleep under the shrub. All of a sudden, an angelic messenger touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked, and right there by his head was a cake baking on hot coals and a jug of water. He ate and drank and then slept some more. The Lord's angelic messenger came back again, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat, for otherwise you won't be able to make the journey." So he got up and ate and drank. That meal gave him the strength to travel 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. He went into a cave there and spent the night. All of a sudden the Lord spoke to him. "Why are you here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been absolutely loyal to the Lord, the sovereign God, even though the Israelites have abandoned the agreement they made with you, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and now they want to take my life." The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. Look, the Lord is ready to pass by." A very powerful wind went before the Lord, digging into the mountain and causing landslides, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the windstorm there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire there was a soft whisper. When Elijah heard it, he covered his face with his robe and went out and stood at the entrance to the cave. All of a sudden a voice asked, "Why are you here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been absolutely loyal to the Lord, the sovereign God, even though the Israelites have abandoned the agreement they made with you, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and now they want to take my life." The Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came, and then head for the desert of Damascus. Go and anoint Hazael the king over Syria. You must anoint Jehu son of Nimshi king over Israel, and Elisha son of Shaphat from Abel Meholah to take your place as prophet. Jehu will kill anyone who escapes Hazael's sword, and Elisha will kill anyone who escapes Jehu's sword. I still have left in Israel 7,000 followers who have not bowed their knees to Baal or kissed the images of him."
Yeah. So I have the job of retelling. So here we go. So Elijah, we'll get to Elisha. Elijah comes off this big battle with a bunch of other prophets of Baal, and he kills a bunch of them. And we'll go into detail. We'll give some context to that a little bit later, but I'm just going to retell what we did here. Anyway, so Jezebel, this evil lady, sends somebody to tell Elijah that she's going to kill him like all of the other prophets were. So Elijah gets up and boogies. He's like, "I'm out of here." And so he goes to the forest, he lays down, falls asleep, and an angel comes to him. Or when he wakes up, there's a cake waiting for him, baked with hot coals, which I can only imagine just tastes amazing. Anyway, the angel tells him, "You need to eat because you need to get your energy." So he goes to sleep again. Well, maybe I'm getting some details mixed up here. But anyway, he goes to sleep. He wakes up, eats again. The angel says, "Now go." So Elijah gets up and walks for 40 days, which I think is just crazy. That's a long walk. Mm-hmm. That's a long ways. I mean, if you're walking 2 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour, I mean, and walking like a good portion of the day, you're a long ways away at 40 days. Mm-hmm. So anyway, he gets this mountain, Mount Horeb, and there he goes into a cave, and the band Earth, Wind, and Fire Do you remember? That's a joke. But anyway, Earth, Wind, and Fire kind of take over this mountain, but God was not in those things. It's kind of God revealing his power to Elijah with the wind causing the rocks to fall and the fire and then just everything happening. And then Elijah hears this whisper from God asking him, like, what in the world are you doing? And Elijah's like, I don't know, because everybody's falling away from you. They're tearing down altars to worship somebody else. They're worshiping idols. They're doing all this other bad stuff. And I just don't feel like I'm doing much good. And God's like, no, man, I got this. You need to do this. I'm going to give you a helper, Elisha. You're supposed to anoint Jehu, who will be a king, the king of Israel. I mean, all this cool stuff is going on. And then God sums it up and says, like, there's still a bunch of people left. Like, these people that you saw that are tearing down altars, that are changing their ways, are not the people, like, not the only people out there. There's still, what does he say, 7,000 people left, 7,000 in Israel, that I'll quote it here, 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal. So, I mean, there's still 7,000 left that haven't done this bad thing. And so God is lifting Elijah's spirit.
So it's a pretty incredible story, especially when you think about what comes right before it, and we'll get into that as well as we just discuss this passage. But remember, our hope today is to think about what it looks like to overcome fear, how God can help us do that. And before we get into the passage and asking the questions, one thing I do want to say, kind of as a disclaimer, is to realize everyone's situation is different. You know, there's a lot of different reasons people might have fear. And just understand, we're trying to talk about this in a way that's very general. Some people struggle with some pretty scary things. And, it might take a lot of work to overcome that. The main thing we want to drive home through this study and through this whole series is that when we work with God, he helps us overcome. Usually, pretty much every time on our own, we are not enough to overcome any situation, any hardship. And so our hope is to see how God helps Elijah and can help us overcome fear. So our first question is looking at who God is. And I want to ask all of us, what does this passage tell us about God? Sam, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. It kind of reminds me of like the VeggieTales song, God is bigger than the boogeyman. Oh, God is bigger than the boogeyman. And I don't know, that just popped into my head right now, but I think a lot of you can relate because a lot of you probably watched VeggieTales as a kid. But, well, hopefully you're still all kids. But anyway, it just reminds me of that. But what does this tell us about God is, God's got our back, and that God's still there, even when, the odds are against us. When Jezebel, this evil lady, says, I'm going to kill you because of what you did to all these other prophets, God is like, I still got this. So Elijah is facing a lot of stuff. He's facing death from Jezebel. He's facing the turning away of a bunch of Jews that are turning away from God. But God, encourages him and says, I'm going to bring you somebody. I'm going to show you my power, what I can do. And I'm going to show you that there's still people that believe. And it's just really cool, this conversation with God, because he gets it. He gets what we're going through, but he's there to encourage Elijah and show him his power.
Yeah. Something that stands out to me is this amazing scene where Elijah meets God on a mountain. Elijah's not the only person to have met God on a mountain. I can think of Moses, and there's probably others, right? But there's this amazing scene where there's the wind, the great powerful wind, there's the earthquake, and there's the fire. And even though those things are marvelous, God is not in those things. And he's very intentional about coming to Elijah in this still small voice. Some scholars even think that the word there is actually silence, that he meets Elijah with silence. But whether it's silence or a whisper, God's intentional about that. And when I think about that and the question that he asks Elijah, what are you doing here, or why are you here? You can really see that God is coming to Elijah in a very gentle way and trying to steer him towards his purpose. He's trying to remind him of who he is and that he's not alone. And these are all things that Elijah really needs. And so in this moment of great fear, when Elijah literally asks the Lord to kill him, God meets him with this gentleness and, directs him towards a new purpose, reminds him of his purpose. So that's what I see. Nikki, what about you?
Yeah, to me, it just stands out the way God is steady, I guess might be a good word, and not in any one way, but in all ways. When he comes to Elijah, there's an element of comfort and reassurance, but there's also the push, like there's still stuff to do. And, I feel like that's how God works. That's, you can see that in the way parents work, or the way I see it. I see teachers work this way with students. Like, when we get frustrated or scared or whatever it may be, yes, we need to be comforted and know that we're supported, but there's also not like this get out of jail free, like just because this scares you, we're not going to do it. And God definitely doesn't roll that way. He's like, yeah, I know it scares you. It's fine. We're going to keep going. Like, you don't need to be scared. And even if you are, we're still going to keep moving. I'm here with you. But that's just steady, consistent way that God works.
And what's interesting is, like, God could have responded differently. I think he would have been justified because, like, again, if we think about what Elijah had been through right before this, if you want to go back and read chapter 18, especially starting in verse 16. I mean, this is one of his most famous moments where he is battling all of these other prophets of this other God. And, it's this big grand show. And Elijah shows that his God, the God of Israel, is the one true God. And it's this huge crushing blow. And then he goes and he kills them all, which we could probably talk about that for a while, but we'll just maybe shove that under the rug or something. But, he had just, like, imagine that scene. Like, he had just witnessed that. And then this woman who is a ruler of, and favored these other prophets who he had killed, she comes to him and says, I'm going to kill you. And he gets so afraid, even though he had just witnessed what God had done to this altar. And so I could see God coming to him and be like, what are you doing? Like, why would you ever be afraid after what you just saw? But he doesn't, like Nikki said, he's steady. And like Sam says, he's got your back. And that's just so cool, So our next question we want to look at is, what do we learn about people? And I think we can learn a lot, especially from, Elijah. Nikki, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, it's funny. I think there's, like you said, Kyle, so many things we can learn. To me, what's standing out today is just we think we know everything all the time. I mean, we have such a narrow view of everything that goes on, just because we're human, we're finite, we're one individual, and God's got such a broad view over time, over, space, all of the things. And so our view compared to God is very, very, very small. And yet constantly we read these stories where we're trying to tell God what's going on. And it's not that God doesn't want us to talk to him, of course, but it's just so interesting that, even these prophets who have spoken with God and really experienced victory with God still try to explain why they can't, or why something's not working, or why they're done. And it's so interesting. And we do that now, today. I mean, I know I do, for sure. I try to tell God why I can't do certain things. And it's like, I don't know why I bother, because I know that that's ridiculous. He's got such a broader understanding of me and of the world around me. But I think that we come back to that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, two things stick out. One is, and I'm not trying to pick on Elijah, because I see myself here as well. And the first one is how easily we forget about God's power.
For sure.
How easily, I mean, just one chapter before, he defeats all these people and it shows God's power and might. And then this evil lady, Jezebel, says, I'm going to kill you, and he takes off for his life. And, there's no trust there that God has his back again, because he just defeated all these other people that would have killed him, And so it's just, I see myself there, because I see God's might. I see God reveals his power to me, and then I forget. And then the second thing is, and I just lost it. I don't remember what it was. Come back to it. I'll have to record that later.
That's fine. So there's a couple things that stand out. The first is, I think, kind of funny, but there's something real here. Like, so he runs away, and he's he's in the desert, and he wants God to kill him. So he's gone from the highest high to the lowest low pretty quickly there. I mean, maybe melodramatic, I don't know, but
It's like, I'm done. Take me.
It's like, okay, that was great. Now this woman wants to kill me. Let's call it. It's been a good life.
Isn't that interesting too?
Yeah.
One woman makes a threat, and it's got him spiraling.
Yeah.
Like, this is one
Well,
person.
I mean, and she was a powerful person.
Yeah.
Like, she was a ruler.
Sure, she's not
yeah,
nobody,
yeah.
but it's just so one individual.
Yeah, one individual, and especially since, wasn't it, how was it 300 prophets? How many were
In verse,
in this battle on Mount Carmel?
and the 450 prophets of Baal
450.
and the 400 prophets of Asherah,
Asherah,
who ate or eat at Jezebel's table. So there's 850 together.
Yeah, okay, so that's a lot of people he slaughtered. Anyways, okay, so coming back all around to this, he's in the wilderness. He wants to die, and so this also, I think, says something about God too. He's visited by an angel, and he basically just needs to sleep and eat. And why is this in here? Elijah takes some naps, and he gets some food, and it's like proof that naps and food are helpful to your spiritual life. I mean, there's got to be a reason this is in here. The Lord is comforting him through this angelic messenger.
It reminds me of one of the 10 Commandments. The Sabbath.
The Sabbath, yeah. The dude
I mean,
needed a break.
There is a point to the Sabbath, and there's a point to this, and God lets him rest for a couple of days and gives him everything he needs. The
Yep.
cake, it talks about the food and water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is even something that now in our secular mental health, this is like your first checklist is always when you feel like you're melting down or you want to make a big decision, like, yelling to God to take your life, for example, might be a big decision. You're supposed, you got to check. Okay, have I had some water today? Have I eaten? Have I had enough sleep? Like, these are the first things you're supposed to cross off your list before you evaluate anything else, because they're important. And it's almost as if God designed us that way.
Yeah. It really is like, Elijah's having a mental breakdown. He is probably spent, and then now his life is threatened. But like, just the simple concept of taking care of ourselves, or allowing the Lord or others to take care of us, and resting and eating, like, we need that. That's important. That's one thing that jumps out here. And I think it's in the Bible for a reason. It's in the story for a reason. And then he spends 40 days on this walk. And I just think he needs time. I mean, yeah, that was probably a long journey and somewhat tiresome, but it gives him time to decompress and to think, and so that when he gets to the mountain of the Lord, he's a little more ready to face God. And no longer is he saying, kill me. Now he's saying, he's saying what really is affecting him, I think, and that is, I've done all of this stuff, and yet so many people are turning away from you. He probably feels like his entire ministry, his entire life is a failure. And what does God do? He reminds him that there are others. And by the way, I'm going to give you a ministry partner, Elisha. So, to me, this is a great reminder that as humans, we need those moments where we're doing self-care, where we're decompressing, and where we're going to God with our issues, with our problems, so that he can fill us back up. Because when we're pouring ourselves out, eventually we're going to be empty.
Absolutely.
If there's nothing else there, let's move on to the next one. And this is where we're listening for what the Holy Spirit has revealed to us in this passage, what's standing out to us that we, want to listen to. So, Sam, do you want to go first here?
Yeah, I mean, it goes off of my point number one. We never got to my point number two because I forgot it. But my point number one earlier, where I'm talking about the idea of forgetting about God's power, and that continually sticks out to me as we're talking about this and as we read it, because that is me. I'm putting myself in Elijah's shoes right now, because that's me, where I see God's power, I see God's might, and then I just so easily forget about it. And I'm fearful of whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot of things to be fearful right now in the world, and fearful of in the world. And so, it's so easy to forget about that. And this is such a great reminder for me right now that God's got this, that God is bigger than the boogeyman. God is bigger than the coronavirus. God is bigger than, there's a lot of scary things going on right now, and there's a lot of things to be fearful of. And whatever your fear is, God's bigger than that, and we just need to rely on him. And sometimes it takes, this rock bottom. It takes us to get to rock bottom and God to bring us back up. But yeah, that's what's really sticking out to me right now.
Yeah, I wonder why. I've always kind of wondered, why do I have to, maybe not always rock bottom, bottom out, but enter into some valley. It's almost like that's part of the process. I don't know. That just kind of hit me. I kind of wonder why. I guess our lives aren't always just perfect and good. We experience hardships, and so sometimes that's where we grow the most. And unfortunately, we kind of forget that message once we enter into the hardship. When things are good, we can remember that. But once things start to get difficult, we kind of forget that important lesson, that's when we're going to grow the most. And something that stands out to me, I really do think God drew me to this passage tonight because I've shared this before. I'm a person who really cares a lot about success. It's important to me to appear successful, and that's kind of the thorn in my flesh. It's one thing, it drives me to be successful, and so that can be good, but it can also be a real detriment to me and my faith. And man, do I struggle with that idea that everything I've done is meaningless. So many people, sometimes right when I think I had some great success with someone, 3 other kids in my youth group or 3 other teens I know, are just, their lives are falling apart. And I get tired of that sometimes, and it makes you want to give up. And so, I really resonate with that idea, with that story, because I see it a lot. And so the question is, can I be receptive like Elisha was? Because he does come around, And can I let go of like my idea of success and just do the work, and then allow God to remind me that like, there's a lot of successes out there that you had nothing to do with, and that's okay, you know. And that's something that has really stood out to me. What about you, Nikki?
To me, what's standing out is, so Elijah's terrified. God comes, he comforts him, and then he's like, okay, this is what I want you to go do. Like, we have things that we're still going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, I talked about God's consistency, but so what I'm hearing in this is that, when we have these fears, like Sam said, listed some things we might have fears of today, and, like Corona or whatever it may be. And it's not that the fear, it's not that the threat, whatever we're afraid of, isn't valid, right? It's not that logically, like, that can't happen. We're not necessarily imagining it or anything like that. But the path through it is often the same. Sometimes we think of conquering fear as this giant battle, and it might feel that way, but the reality of the steps is take care of yourself, drink enough water, get enough rest, eat, maybe fellowship, whatever it is you need to take care of your basics, and then do the next right thing. Because God lists out the next things that he wants Elijah to do. And maybe our next right things are just going day to day to day. And I think sometimes that we don't like to hear that that's, the solution to conquering big feelings, because that seems so lackluster, I suppose. But I think sometimes that really is the best thing we can do.
Yeah, I mean, Elijah, his fear was valid. I mean, she said she was going to kill him, and that's something to be concerned about, right? And obviously there's a difference between like having genuine concerns and having just crippling fear. And Elijah's fear became crippling. I mean, he wanted to die, he ran away, and so it's important to think through like, how can I always draw near to God and just keep doing that next thing and know that he's there, he's got my back, he's consistent, and allow that relationship through time to like conquer that fear. And sometimes that's what it takes. That's kind of what I hear, you saying, Nikki, and it makes a lot of sense. It's not always this big, huge like moment where we, it makes me think about the ropes course, because we get to see people experience fear sometimes, and it can be fun when you're on the ground watching that. But I love those moments when someone, like, they're stuck on the leap of faith pole and they're almost to the top and they're so scared, or maybe they're on the top and now they're thinking about jumping out to the trapeze and they're so scared, but then they just decide to do it. They jump and they grab the trapeze, or even if they miss, they're just like, they have this big breakthrough. And sometimes it happens that way, but sometimes it's just
or even the ones who are scared when they're halfway up a tree.
Mm-hmm.
And we tell them one more staple.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how many times one more staple and they can climb the rest of the tree.
Yeah.
They just got stuck in the middle. They just needed to get over that, and then they're fine.
Yeah, it's like when they look down, once they look down and the reality of them being 25 feet off the ground hits them and they're paralyzed. But once they can do that next staple, then it's like, oh, I'm good.
And we have models of, the reassurance and the reminders that we're there. We remind them, we're down here. We're looking at everything. We know that all their gear's good. Sometimes we'll have their belay team tighten their ropes so they can feel the support of their harness. Much in the way that God reminds Elijah that he's there with him.
That's such a good analogy, I guess, or because like when you think of that, and maybe some of you have done the ropes course and maybe some of you don't, but I mean, that is so good because, you're doing it, you think you're doing it all by yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what's crippling. I've been there when I get halfway up the leap of faith and I'm thinking I'm doing it by myself, and I totally forget about this harness that's on me. I mean, that's when you get scared, but when you like take that time, you stop, you lean back a little bit to feel the weight, that harness,
Take a deep breath.
which would be in this analogy, God, kind of sitting down, taking a breath,
Eating some cake.
yeah, exactly. But getting getting through that and just trusting that harness and that those people that are belaying you have you.
Mm-hmm.
But, coming back to this, it's that idea that God's got you, that God is that harness. And that sometimes, we do need to take a break, but there are next steps, and we need to be looking for those next steps, that next staple on that tree, whatever. We need to be looking for that and how to get that, because God has a plan. And there's always something, maybe that not always something next, but we need to be looking for that and kind of, what's the right word? Starts with a D. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But looking
Discern?
for, yes, discerning.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Discern that and looking for that, where God is leading you next. And sometimes it's on a 40-day journey. And sometimes it's, maybe a little bit later, or maybe it's calling somebody else and planting that seed in somebody else to take over your job, like Elijah did with Elisha.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that answers that next question for me, is that how do I have eyes to see the opportunities to live it out now? It's just that. Wait on God, discern a little bit, pray, talk to God, and then see what those doors are that he's either opening or closing for you,
Mm-hmm.
and go through the doors that are open and find that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like we really have already been answering that last question and thinking about how we can live it out now. For me, it's going to be finding those moments to rest, but then also thinking through that question that God asked Elijah, what are you doing here? And then also realizing that, like, God has already provided that answer for me. I don't have to figure that out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I'm seeing. Nikki, anything else from you?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that, kind of a reminder for me not to dwell on all of the other stuff. Elijah lists all of these other things that are happening, or all of these people who still deny God, or whatever it may be. And I can do that too, just as easily all the time. And it doesn't do any good. And it's interesting because God doesn't actually refute anything that Elijah says. He's just like, yeah, but there's this other stuff, and that's what we're going to focus on.
Yeah.
And so just a reminder to me, just focus on the path and that God's laid in front of me. What are we doing that's good?
So we want to know what you heard in this passage today. Leave us comments, text, email, whatever you do, whatever your jam is.
Yeah, we really appreciate the comments that some people have already given. So thank you for that.
We want to know. We also want to know if there's a fear that you have, and that's not necessarily something you need to share with everybody in the public comments below.
Yeah.
If you want to, you can. But we also want to pray with you. We want to know what you're going through, because we all need somebody to talk to. We all need somebody to go through something with us, because Christianity is not an individualistic thing. It's a community thing. And that's why we're doing this. This method of DBS, because we're all here in the same room, though it doesn't look like it, but we're sharing this together. We're sharing our lives together, and we want to share our lives with you and have you share your lives with us. So share with us, whatever that is. But anyway, we ask that you like, subscribe, and follow us. And we'll see you next week. We ask that you live it out now.
I think this is great.